Don't you want to talk about evil?
How about Glenn Danzig? Is he a fan? You ever get a email from that guy or something?
Glenn Danzig.
Something strikes me like he'd be a big fan.
He was a fan. I did some work for Verotic. But there was one funny story with this guy that I don't understand it.
Since we began this YouTube channel like 8 months ago, there's been one name that comes up in almost every episode. It's not Jack Kirby. It's not Will Eisner. It's Tim motherfucking Vigil. We're sitting here at Heroes Con, and we have the hot lights on you, man. I want to thank you for coming by.
Peace, love.
And let's get into it, Jim. We're going to get all of the questions that we've always had answered tonight about Silver Wolf.
It's 8 inches. Hangs to the left.
It's going to be a fun night.
Indeed. Let's start. What's the first comic you draw, Tim?
Grips or Nightmasters, man?
Oh, this is the big one. Now, some of you think there's a stealthness to this, but it was Grips.
Okay.
The Nightmaster came later. And Grips was a fun one. Came in, there's this guy, I'm bowling in my bowling league, and there was a guy I knew that was also part of a group of younger artists that came from the same high school I came from. And his name was Stan. And he comes up to me and goes, "Hey, have you heard about this Silver Wolf company that's starting some comics here in Sacramento?" I said, "No." And this other guy, Tim Foster, he goes, "I walked in as a writer and he hired me as an artist." And I said, "Shit." I go, "Man, I can get a job here, right?" So I go show the guy, Chris Silver's my work, and he goes, "I'm going to put you on my best book, Grips." I go, "Whatever, man."
How old were you?
26, 27.
Was your plan to make comics? Did this just kind of come out of the blue?
That came out of nowhere. I mean, I had ideas. I did a fanzine with a friend of mine that owned a comic store. But I was doing like little Xerox, 11 by 17 Xeroxes of 3 stories. It was me, my brother, and this other guy, John Palmer. And I was bringing those around to comic shops saying, "Hey, just, sell them for $0.25."
It would be great to get the great Joe Vigil in front of the hot lights someday, too, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
I don't know what Joe would have to say, really.
We could elicit something, man. We can talk dog a little bit.
And, dog is a good one. That's my favorite.
Yeah, mine too. So, Chris Silver and Silver Wolf is sort of the black and white comics of the 80s. When I think of those, that's one of those interesting publishers. What can you tell us about Chris Silver?
Douche.
Was the capital D or small one?
Big. His problem is that being that he got into that business where he could he was putting out some shit. And he was getting 30,000 print runs at the time.
Those post Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle days, man, were kind of
But
crazy.
he was putting out like the Eradicators and what was the other?
Port?
Dungeoneers,
That was
right.
a Vigil book?
Well, no, I just inked a little bit of it, a cover or something like that. But he was doing The Fat Ninja. I thought was the other good one by Gary Amaro. But he just got caught up in all the money, and then like when Grips hit it, he's like, I was making like $2,200 an issue, and he was making 40,000 print run. He was making like $15,000 for himself after everything, and I'm getting 2. And I'm going, okay, fine. And you figured he would have sat there and go, "Hey, we got a hit. Let's share some of this." But he didn't. He started buying houses and everything, and then he wasn't giving anything over to me. And it's like, I wouldn't sit there and tell him, like, this isn't you, but everybody's telling me it's me. It's the art that everybody's liking and how it's presented. But, I just went along with it, and we started doing portfolios. And this is where it really got nasty, because it just, we printed 100 portfolios of the grips, and he charged $3 for it. And he did 100 of them. And so he comes up to me and goes, "You get $1, the company gets $1, and I get $1." And I go, "Well, you are the company." And he started getting a little huffy about it. I said, "Whatever, okay, fine." So the first one goes out and it does real well. He gives me $100. Or wait, he gives me $100 because I made $300. Well, he kicks up once it gets going. It kicks up to like 1,000. He prints. He hands me $100, and I'm like, "What the fuck, dude?" I just go, "What happened to you get $1, the company gets $1, and I get $1?" And he just exploded on me. And it was like, all right, that's it. And I was happy. I was working and I was doing some stuff, but after that, I just started drawing shit. I didn't care. And then it just came down to like, there was this other guy that did Comics Express. I don't know if you remember Omega came out through that in the first time. Well, he was coming to visit because he saw he was selling like 150 grips through his store. And he saw like, wow, this is really cool. So he flew out from New York to Sacramento to talk to Silvers about just seeing what could happen. But Silvers got really tight and just didn't even want to see him. I go, this guy just flew from New York just to have, talk with you. And he didn't want to talk to him. So I come in, and he wanted to meet me. So I come in and I say, hey, and we hung out. And then he brought me out to New York. And then I jumped ship over to him. And we did that. We did Omega. And he was the one that told me I should do something like grips. Because the Omega didn't really go over real big, like he was hoping. So he said, your bread and butter is the violence and stuff. So we came up with Faust.
Once you go from one claw to two, man, everything changes.
Well, one claw to two, and threw a little bit of Satan in there and some hot chicks, and gave him, made the artist not a comic artist, but a fine artist, But once it got personal, and I was able to do it with David Quinn, and we were able to develop it ourselves, I could make it as hardcore as I wanted. I didn't have to listen to Silvers or anybody.
That's one thing. I was surprised to learn that Grips was your first comic because, I come to you through Faust. Like, I
Right.
found Faust, and whenever I get back to Grips, it's like, you're pretty formed. Stylistically, you're there. The violence that, was one of the major characteristics of Faust is on display from the get-go, and Grips.
Right.
All the pieces feel like they're there whenever you kind of hit the ground running, so to speak.
It was in the portfolios that I really started really pushing my style, because I was just doing these one pieces and I was really going, man, I made it into comics. People are loving this shit. I'm gonna do my best work here. And I started just doing all sorts of stuff, and the violence was there. I was really into just like splatter gore, and I was just putting detail into these pieces, and people were liking them. But the comic, I wasn't doing that because he wanted that stuff cranked out.
Right.
I'd be sitting there drawing a page, and the guy next to me, I'd hand it to him, and he'd start inking it. And they weren't great inkers either. And the only issue that I inked myself, well, I inked the first one. I think I inked the second one.
Are you saying that you guys worked in like a studio environment, or metaphorically speaking?
Well, sort of. The inker had a large art table, and I knew him. He was John Palmer that I did work with on the Xerox stuff, and I got him to do some inking, and made him some money. But we were just passing it over, and he wasn't a great inker. This guy was heavy, and it was like, whatever, who cares?
Right.
And Silverwolf didn't care. He didn't care how it looked. People were buying it, and I didn't care for that too much because I had an idea of, the quality's not good, and what can you do? I wasn't calling the shots.
Yeah. I wonder what your influences are, because I don't see comics quite like your comics before that. So, are there guys you're looking at, or comics or other media? Like, where are you getting this inspiration to basically make comics that don't look like anything else?
Well, I was always a big Marvel fan. I was a comic collector, and I collected artists that I liked, and I didn't see anything. I didn't ever have it like established in my mind that I wanted to do something different. It was just that I like these artists. I like comics. I got a chance to do it, but being exposed artistically before I started comics, one, at an early age, I was influenced by pornography, finding porn magazines and shit. So I had an interest in the erotica. I loved violence. I've always loved violence in movies and stuff like that. So the Wild Bunch, at the end of the Wild Bunch, if you've ever seen it, stunned me. And my brother, we saw that and we were like, oh my God. It was like, the heavens, clouds opened up and the angels were singing to us. And that's where all the splatter came from. Later, a little bit of the Asian cinema, but not a heavy influence, but a little bit. But that stuff, and then seeing Richard Corbin at a young age, I was like, wow, you're looking at Marvel, you're looking at DC, and then all of a sudden you get these undergrounds coming in, and all of a sudden they're doing just, some of these artists were putrid. And it was like, oh my God, it's the effect that these things had on me. And it was the first time that, as a young man, you're starting to get a boner over looking at drawings. And you're like, fuck, look at this. I forget who it was. I think the artist's name was Irons.
Greg Irons.
He did a story that was about this street cleaner at car accidents. And he goes in there and he's like sweeping up, and he always had these distorted, ugly faces on people, and he was making this guy all gross and pussy looking. But he was scooping up parts of the body stuff and sticking in his pockets. He would go home and put them in jars and stuff. And then one night he brings his wife down and they pour all the parts and gore on the ground and they start fucking. And I'm just like, oh my God. And I couldn't believe it, but it was great. And I was just like, this is horrifying. And so, Marvel Comics never had that impact on me.
It's not.
Even when they did like a horror line and something like that, you just went, oh, that's fine, that's nice. But the like, oh God, and that was a big influence on me, that story.
How old about were you whenever you encountered?
Probably about 13.
Yeah, that's an impact time.
Yeah, very much so. And there was a couple other. The thing about the undergrounds is that they had artists that, they just drew ugly people in stories, and just like it was just like, my God. And yet, like this one guy, there's a story, I forget who the artist was, but he goes to this planet that's just, the people are just all screwed up and mutated and everything. And he's an astronaut that's caught there, and he picks one girl to screw, but he puts a mask over her face. And he's screwing her, and then all of a sudden a ship comes down. He's like, oh, yeah, I'm leaving. And the girl's like, oh, you're leaving me, And she has her mask on still. And you're like, oh, this is so sad. But then the astronauts come out, and this mutation has reached Earth, and so they're all fucked up, the people, and he's the only normal one, sorta. The way the guy drew him, was still bad. But he's like, and they're like, wow, look at chicks. And it was ugly. It was just, but you could tell that the stories were just, this idea of dementedness could really go somewhere. And it hooked with me.
Where were you finding these kind of underground comics? Were there head shops or comic shops?
Yeah, because, I was growing up when the first, comic shops were coming around. The head shops were there, and they were carrying the underground, because San Francisco was pumping them out from Ripoff, so they were right there, and we'd go over there, and we were able to. I didn't buy them directly. I got them through guys that were older than me. But
Were you a kid, that drew your whole life?
yeah,
Would you say you're self-taught as an artist?
yeah, pretty much. Self-taught myself by looking at, of course, comics and stuff like that. But I have a memory all the way back to kindergarten where people thought, hey, that's pretty good. And then as I grew up, people kept saying, oh, you're good. But I couldn't draw it in my head. I always had to copy stuff. But they're going, oh, you're good. I'm like, well, am I? Because I can't draw a picture,
Yeah.
that looks good. But I could copy one, and it would turn out pretty good.
That's the starting ground.
Yeah. And, like, when my brother and I used to draw comics, he was very, very intuitive out of his head from the get-go. And he would sit down and draw a page, and I would be like, oh, that's fucking awesome. And then I would draw the next page. I'd go, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'd go get a stack of comics, every artist that I liked, and it'd be right next to me, and I'd spend like about 3 hours doing my page, because I'd go through a comic and go, okay, I like that. And then, I'm looking at Neil Adams, I'm looking at Bernie Wrightson, I'm looking at Barry Smith, and I'm just looking at all my favorites right there, and I'm copying these guys. So my style is developing through like a stew, everything's being thrown into it. And I don't consider myself really original, but I've been able to do a nice, cooking of a package. And then when it came to like high school, it finally hit me that they kept saying I'm an artist. And I go, well, I'm going to have to draw it in my head. And I stopped copying things from that point. By the time I became a senior, I was doing some pretty neat stuff. And I was going, wow, that's not bad. And I was developing inking at the time with a brush and stuff.
How did you figure out that part? Had you read, like, this is the tool to use for comics? Or
Yeah. My brush style, though, was real fine. It wasn't like, the thick strokes that a comic would have. I mean, I did, like, real fine feathering. That was almost a grayscale. And maybe that's where my meticulousness comes in. Because I would just sit there and feather this sucker, And I was using small brushes and everything. I didn't know any real craft besides a pencil, that was into comics. Mm-hmm. But you had the ink. I didn't know about crow quills or anything like that. I used a little bit in school, but I hated them. But that's where some of the ideas came from of other artists and all.
Was your brother older or younger than you?
He's older.
Older, okay. We should say Joe Vigil, who's also done several comics and done some comics. So, after high school, do you think about art school? Do you go to art school?
I went to college. I took art classes, but I always looked at it as, I'll just take art classes because I'm good at it, and I'll just develop. But I didn't look at it as, going into art history, but I took it. But I didn't look at it as a major. Mm-hmm. I was into filmmaking, and I just took art for a class just to keep in practice.
And still keeping your eye on comics at that time?
I was just drawing. I didn't look at it as I'm going to do comics. I was just drawing, and my style just happened to be, comic book. Because I was looking at comics still. I was looking at Wrightson. I was looking at Barry Smith, Mike Kaluta, and these guys. They were always like the class ahead of me because they were like 10 years older than me. And when they came out with, I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Studio.
Yes.
Okay.
That to me was like, oh, right on. The comic people these guys are going to really try to push it to an art level. And as much as they did, it failed. But I went, that's where I'm going. I'm going to pursue that romantic style, that surrealistic style, and try to show that this art form can be something valuable. And keep comic book. I didn't want to go into, like, say, Salvador Dali or Escher or something like this. I wanted comic book to be what I was doing and always have that influence.
That's pretty interesting to hear, because I try to think of like what would have been contemporaries. You know, so many, like the studio, it's guys that are kind of stepping out of comics, or possibly Will Eisner thinking like graphic novel, again kind of stepping out of comics.
I didn't get into Eisner for a long time. Getting into the business, I think, until I met David, and that was like, I was like about 2 years into it, 3 years into it. I didn't even know who Eisner was.
How'd you meet David?
When I went to New York, that guy that came across, this guy was named Uk Baez, and he knew David because David went to his shop, and David was teaching in Brooklyn. And so David came in, we met, and the stuff that I was doing with Omega, I had started some pages, and they thought, and I was having my friend John that I've talked about, he was writing it, but they didn't like it. And so they said, why don't you bring David on? And I said, okay. Can't hurt.
We should say it's David Quinn, the writer of Faust.
Yeah.
Do you guys kind of hit it off right away? Do you have to size him up?
David's kind of the person that pretty much gets along with everybody. I'm the hard person. I'm the person that's kind of like, you know, I'm kind of standoffish. I keep to myself. But David was really easy to get along with, and he listened, and he took the position of basically listening to what my ideas were and working with me. So he made it real easy.
Who publishes, you know, in the beginning, so you guys kind of gel and you start working on Faust.
Yeah.
And eventually you're going to self-publish Faust.
Yes.
What's the step to getting there?
Well, the Comics Express people, Uk Baez, we got into conflict. And Tim Tyler was working with North Star at the time. And he had asked me to do a story for their North Star Presents of Tim Tyler's character, what was the guy, Ravage, I think his name was. He had like a saw in his hand.
Oh, yes, of course.
And so I did that, and they loved it, and Tim loved my work. But once the Comic Express people who started going off, I went to these guys and say, hey, we have this story, Omega, and we have this other one, Faust. Do you want them? And North Star said, yeah. So we jumped ship right there. And then we're sitting there with these guys, and we're doing pretty good. And Faust is now kicking in, right? People are loving it. Motherfuckers start spending money, not paying us. You know, it's like, what's going on here? They started a project with to do the She-Faust that Mark Beecham was going to do. Mm-hmm. Now, Mark was much more of a known talent than me and David. So the North Star people started paying him in advance. And Beecham has a little bit of a reputation of not finishing stuff. So they're taking my money, giving it to him, and he doesn't finish. And so they're not going to make the money off of his book, which was, when I heard the numbers, was like, it was going to be like a 45,000 print run, you know, and they would have been great. But he dicked around, and we finally said, why are we listening? You know, Dave and I go, why don't we just do it ourselves? You know, what's the big deal? And so we finally just started doing it ourselves, and some guy helped us put it together and get it printed and stuff like that. But number 7, we finally just did it ourselves and said, fuck these guys. I had to walk away from $30,000, but it was like,
price of freedom, man.
Yeah, and control. You know, I got to see where the money went, and I paid. You know, I was the one that was putting out the checks.
And that's Rebel Studios.
Rebel Studios, yeah.
Do you feel like we're skipping many steps in a way, because we have Caliber Presents #1, Cuda, you and Tim Tyler? Like, there's a lot of ground to cover here today.
Yeah. So you want to talk about Caliber?
Let's talk about Caliber. At issue 1, man. Not only is it the first appearance of Crow, it's the first appearance of Cuda.
I'm trying to remember, because Gary Reed was doing that, and I had done the first CUDA chapter in my early fanzine magazine called Access in Sacramento. And I had that, and Silvers actually did a printing of it called Heart of Darkness that I never saw any money from or anything. I didn't see any books. But that's when everything was falling apart. So he did it, and I don't think it ever got distributed for a long time. I don't know. I stopped paying attention to him. But I had that, and I guess somehow Gary must have got in contact with me, and I expanded that story, and I finished it from what it was. I expanded it out and did it through Caliber.
Over how many issues of Caliber Presents was it? First 6, maybe?
I think it was the first 6, yeah.
Was that a positive experience working with Caliber?
Yeah. I mean, I had no problem with them. They printed the story. They paid me. It wasn't a lot, but
Probably the biggest publisher, thinking of Silverwolf, thinking of North Star, I feel like Caliber's probably a little bit of a bigger publisher than those guys. Possibly more organized. I don't know that for sure, but maybe a more professional setup.
he was doing a couple things. Well, Gary Reed was a real nice guy. I had no problem with him. But after we did it, I'm doing Rebel and just do my own thing then. So that's where I focused because I was making decent money at the time.
What year does Rebel start?
I want to say 90. I think that's when the first issue 7 came out.
Okay, so I wonder what you remember of sort of the comics landscape at that time. Lots of distributors were around then.
Yeah.
As an independent guy, you're able to make a good living.
Yeah. Throughout my career, I haven't really looked at the landscape as really checking it out and going, how do you work it? It was there. I used it. And then it just kind of fell apart, And then I learned basically what people in the industry thought, why it fell apart later. I just saw it fell apart and I said, fuck, I'm losing money.
Yeah.
And that was it.
A big focus of the channel whenever we started this YouTube thing was early Wizard magazines, and we used that as the backbone to just talk about the speculator market and how there were these crazy inflated numbers. If you guys started in about 1990, self-publishing with Rebel Studios, you must have benefited a little bit from that scene, I would imagine.
Well, I never did any chromium covers.
No.
I mean, but there was that going around and stuff like that, and you saw the gimmicks come into play, hologram covers and shit like that. And I was always like, if the comic's not good inside, I never thought that you should do that,
Sure.
Because a lot of it was even that Spider-Man.
McFarlane.
I don't know if it was McFarlane. No, it was a Spider-Man that had a hologram cover. I don't know if it was a McFarlane issue, but the inside was total shit.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, all right, you got a hologram cover, big deal. I was always just interested in just putting out a solid book and, and putting it out there, not having to go, well, you got to buy 7 different covers.
Yeah.
I never found what the big deal was about that.
Let me ask you this. With the speculation market kind of on the rise, when you put out the Rebel edition, Faust #1,
Mm-hmm.
is that maybe the biggest selling comic that you've made?
Through Rebel?
I guess period.
Number 1 of Faust would have been probably the biggest, just the fact that
The North Star one or Rebel?
Well, the North Star one went through I think 4 to 5 reprints.
Wow.
I think that, as I understood it, it hit about 100,000 print or copies made throughout its
Right.
time. The Rebel one, no. There was a reprint of it, but when we were doing it, we'd get, because distributors had reorders, and so we'd get initial order of say 25,000. I could go, well, let's print 50 because we know we're going to get a reorder. and usually that would come up within like 2 months, 3 months, and you get a reorder, and so you're making, you know, some good money. And then they stopped doing the reordering. I was like, what's going on? Why would you stop when you're making money at this stuff? I never understood it. But it was just, they were cutting back on labor, I guess, and they didn't want to handle it. But it killed a lot of, you know, like the independent guys. I relied on it, you know. And all I could just say is, fuck them. That's it. Like I said, I don't pay much attention to it, but when it happens, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
One thing whenever I was a kid, like Dark Knight and Watchmen and these comics would come out, and it started to be this conversation of like, hey, Biff Bam Pow comics aren't just for kids anymore.
Right.
All of your comics are, you know, aimed at older readers. Was that around? Like, were you seeing other creators that were working that way? Like, that seems like this huge leap, but it's one that you were just always at that state and seemed to flourish in that state.
Well, the independent market gave room for more, like The Crow. You know, it was drama, more adult in a way. You know, Cry for Dawn was right up there when we were doing it, and that was some extreme, not extreme, but there was some extreme horror in it. But it was adult. But I always looked at it saying, I'm going to make a comic for my age. I don't give a shit about the kids. The kids are going to like it. They're going to find, if they hear about it, they're going to get it.
Which we did.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Right. But I'm doing it for my age, and even as I've gotten older, I'm going, this is still for my age. I'm not doing it for kids. And I'll even put it on there, even though you put adults only on a comic, it kills it. But I'm going to go, this is for adults, man. And it pisses me off when I see these companies like Marvel, and they do extreme dirty shit in their stuff, kind of underneath it all, and the characters and stuff like this, and they just say, oh, it's mature.
Yeah.
You know, there's some hardcore stuff. You know, Wanda and Pedro Quicksilver having an affair as brother and sister. You know, you're like, what the fuck are you guys pushing? And anybody can pick it up. And there'd be comic stores around my area where they would go, oh, we're not gonna carry Faust. I go, but you're gonna carry this shit. You know, that's, at least I tell you who can do this, you know. And you're letting any kid read this, oh, having sex with my sister, you know. Terrible.
Besides retail, you know, some retailers maybe choosing not to carry it, was there ever any situations, any like CBLDF, obscenity, anything like that ever come out of Faust? Or
What do you mean? What?
Have you heard of any stores that got pinched or something from
Well, yeah.
selling to me or anything? I never know jail. Don't worry about that.
No, but there was at the time there was a big uproar that the comics, it got to be like the comics code bit. It was like these comics, because everything's supposed to be for kids, and it's like, no, it's not. And so there was plenty of stores that were being raided, and well, I wouldn't say plenty, but there was a handful, that just to get people to be scared about stuff. And they were going, oh, look at, you got this, especially in the Bible Belt, you know. They'd come pick out the comics, and Faust would be one of them, and they'd shut down stores or find these store owners. It's like, fuck, you stupid. What the fuck? It's a comic book.
In the modern day, there's a guy, Jason Carnes, Fuckator is the comic. And,
I like his work.
Yeah, and every now and then there'll be a little controversy or something online surrounding his work. And then, you know, in the background, he would let us know, like, man, I just sold even more comics than I have in the past, like, 2 years. When there would be some sort of controversy, people holding up Faust saying, like, look, what's in these stores? Would there be an uptake in sales? Anything that you
No,
would notice?
because people became scared. It was more of a fear of it, so, you know, stores stopped carrying it. And it was like, what? Again, it was like, why are you even listening to this community of fear, you know? When you can go into a bookstore and they have, being that, okay, it's written only, but you can have all sorts of obscenities in this bookstore, but you're not going to go close down the bookstore. But the fact that you go into a comic store that they say is for kids, it's like, you can't push it, even though you get an adult section, you know? I mean, you're supposed to be, I can't sell this to anybody over 18, except over 18. And they would still frick around it. I didn't like it. I didn't have a lot of control over it, though.
Yeah, of course not.
As the 90s progress, you know, we go from that bubble expanding to the speculator bust, you know, and distributors folding, and really a bad time for comics in the mid to late 90s. What's your experience like as a small publisher?
He got fucked, you know, because when the big crash happened, this is how I understand why it happened, because Marvel went off to distribute themselves, and then they found out that, this is a big fucking headache, and then they had to go back to Diamond. But by the time they went back, all these other distributors had gone. Well, I think I was on issue 10 of Faust, and I was doing it the way that I was doing it always. You figure we're going to get about 25,000, let's print 50,000. Well, the crash comes, we don't have reorders. So I got shitloads of boxes of Faust 10, EO2. I'm sleeping on these boxes, you know, my mattress is on it. For years. I couldn't get rid of them. But yeah, I got screwed. I lost money.
Yeah, as those distributors go away, they're not paying you for comics that they sold and whatnot.
But they're not, you know, when it happened, everybody the stores sucked in their idea of what their money was. As much as I was selling, at the least, like 30 copies of Faust, they weren't putting the money there. They were putting the money into, like, say, Batman, and every title of Batman, even though Faust could have been selling more than what some of these titles were selling. But they just went right to the majors, and then they would spend, I think it was like 75% of their money on this, and then they would just trickle it down. But again, I wasn't like riding a wave of Faust, though.
Right.
That was part of my problem. And again, I didn't really care, but because I was just exploring my ideas and everything. But you know, I didn't look at it and go, I got a hot book, I need to put this out faster. I need to be making this money every 2 months instead of every once a year, or maybe twice a year. Yeah, I didn't care. I was going, I did this. I got another idea. Let's do this issue. Then I'd go back. I would do like Faust, EO, Faust, Gothic Knights, Faust, EO, Faust, Gothic Knights. Faust was always in there, but I was jumping in between other stuff too. And I didn't, you know, I just figured everything would sell well.
A big attraction of Faust really was that meticulous artwork that you had on display there, and all sorts of methods and materials being used on that series, from Zipatone to duotone board, and almost mirroring the death of the distributors. Slowly but surely, there was the death of those methods and materials.
Well, yeah, computers brought a part of that in. But they stopped making duo-shade paper. I had some all the way to the end.
Yeah,
I had a good stock of it.
I was going to ask if you
but
when it started to go away, if you started buying.
But the chemical, I didn't have the chemicals, so I ran out of chemicals. So it was like I had to use real sparse areas and just maybe a highlight here, and then it was like, especially the last 2 issues, I said, well, I'll go to the computer and gray tone them. But then I got into this whole, I'll gray tone it all. You know, I wasn't just put a gray here like Zipatone.
Yeah.
I said, I'll do the whole thing. And so there's a big change of how the last 2 issues look.
Those are the Avatar issues?
No, they're old studios.
Oh, okay.
Did you do that grayscaling yourself?
Yeah. So more work for me.
Well, my reason for asking that is it feels like, you know, self-taught as an artist, you're just picking up whatever tools, including digital, along the way. I find that commendable because a lot of people do tend to get into like one track, you know, one style, one method. And digital is often
Well, this wasn't, but this is just working with gray tone and working with the eraser at a certain opacity, or the dodge and what's the other one? Dodge and burn tools. I wasn't using a lot of tools. I was just using about maybe 4 tools just to like I would do a sheet of gray, and then I would add darker grays, and then I would just go in and cut in highlights and mold it. But it wasn't a lot, but it was just a lot of work.
Were there artists along the way that you would kind of go to and pick their brains on some of this methodology?
No. No, you just knew computers are out there, and you go, all right, I'll buy one. Check it out. Get Photoshop. See what it can do. I don't associate with a lot of artists. I don't pick their brains if I meet them. It's pretty just hello, how are you? Or maybe if they're doing something, I'll go, oh, that's pretty cool. What are you doing? But I'm never around somebody. I think I've done it once when the guy out of Arizona. I got to go to his studio, and he was real great at Photoshop, and I was able to sit there and watch him for a half hour or so and try to pick up as much as I could. But,
what about so you come out of the Sacramento area? Sam Keith, another cartoonist that comes out of there. We've seen your names in credits on at least a couple of books.
Yeah. First one comes to mind, Marvel Comics Presents 100.
Oh, yeah. I said, I wasn't supposed. I didn't think I was going to get credited for that. Sam calls me up. Hey, can you help me with some layouts because I'm late? I got to get this done. I go, okay. And I just chunk out these pages, like 7 pages. Chunk them out. I go, you're going to fix these up, right? I'm just doing layout. He goes, yeah. I think he might have done maybe 2 pages. And then he just slopped the rest out. And I was like, Then I saw my name was on. I'm like, oh, no. And I looked at it. I was like, oh, no. It was horrible.
Can you walk us through your kind of a process, like a page of Faust? How does that develop? How do you do the writing? Are you working from a script?
Yeah. Do you and Quinn work Marvel method?
Well, the early days of Faust, David and I, we developed the story pretty much one summer. Pretty much from beginning to end, if I remember, of a basic of how it was going to go. And David would start on the script, and he'd be writing it, he'd be giving me it, and while I'm like knowing what's going to go on, I might be working on a cover or something like this. And then I would go over and go, what about this? What about this? Oh, no, what about this? And then he'd rewrite it, and then I'd look at it again, and then he'd rewrite it if I wanted it. We'd fine-tune it, and then when I finally read it, and I went, I can draw this, I would start on it. And he didn't have any page breakdowns or anything. We just had it like a script, just a story. And I would go in and go, well, I want this part here to be, I want this to be 2 pages. I want this to be bigger. Or this one could only be here. And I would break it down, the whole book. And then near the end, though, it came down to where I was basically drawing it and he was writing to it, just to get it done.
When you say you're breaking stuff down, are you actually drawing like a page breakdown, or are you?
Yeah, I would slice up the, like say there's a paragraph, I would slice it up where I want dialogue to slice up, and then I would do little thumbnails on the side, and then I would do larger thumbnails of all the pages, and then draw them from there. And they would change.
How long did it take the first Faust run to complete? Like 13 years?
No, it took 25.
Yeah.
We just finished it back in, I think, 14.
You did. You know what? In my mind, I was thinking 2004, but it was 2014.
Yeah, it went along. It took a long time.
Yeah.
And there were times when there was like 7 years in between that a book wouldn't come out.
What was happening in those years?
Trying to make money, and
going to shows, commissions, or
yeah, working with other things and just doing things. But I would just sit there and go, okay, David was doing stuff, but then it came down like when it finally finished. It said, I just got to finish this fucker, Taking 7 years between a book was ridiculous, and a lot of that's my fault. but I didn't want the quality to be hindered. So when I sat down with it, I go, you can't. I didn't want, when you looked at those last two issues, I didn't want people to go, well, they're out, and oh well, you kind of just got it out there. I think it ended out well. There's some really good stuff in those last two issues.
What's the print run like on those last couple? Because those are expensive books to track down.
3,000, 5,000 maybe. They were low. And people go, oh, you're lucky to get that. That's a good print run for an independent. I go, fuck. You're covering your printing costs, and that's it. I didn't make any money off that stuff.
And that was the Avatar stuff, right?
No, it was the end of Faust, the last two issues. I didn't really make any money off of that. For all the work I put into it, it was like, I'm done. That was, the neat thing is like the last line that I drew on it was, I gotta admit, was a thrill. And I went, this fucker's done. I was pretty happy with myself. And it was a very quiet moment. You're by yourself, and for 25 years you've been hearing how this thing is a certain liked in a lot of ways, and yet it's not selling, and people are forgetting about it within that 25 years. But there's still like a cult out there, and it's like, but when you finished it, you went, there you go. And now let it sit out in the world and see what it can do, and if that even means anything, I was just happy to get it done.
Do you have plans for it at this point? Collected editions?
Sure, sure. But it's a matter of I don't have the money to sit there and go put it together. I have to put it together. I've tried to have other people put it together, and there's been always something coming up that causes a conflict or even disaster to these people. It's weird, but I have to do it all if it's going to get done, and I don't have time for it.
We've, like I said before, we've been covering Wizard Magazine on the channel a lot, and David Quinn started writing articles somewhere in the teens, probably, of these issues. Somewhere in 1992, he's talking about the impending Faust movie and how he has to turn in a screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
Flick comes around 2000.
2000, yeah.
Yeah. Was the property constantly being optioned?
Oh, no.
No?
No. It took about 10 years to get that thing going. I met this guy, Ted Chalmers, he hired me to do for an independent creature design. And while I was doing that, he goes, hey, did you ever think about doing Faust as a movie? And I said, well, yeah, sure. And we let him, David and I said, well, anytime you want to present it to somebody, go ahead. And it took about 10 years, and he finally got it, someone interested, and got it made, and I got to give him kudos to that. But we didn't really benefit from it. When the movie came out, the book didn't do any better. The movie went direct to DVD, so it was like people had to hear about it here and there, and then when it got to Sci-Fi Channel, I don't know if they made the association between this is a comic book or whatever, and then the movie wasn't the comic,
Mm-hmm.
so it there was criticism against it and everything like that. And I didn't have much to do with it once the movie rights were sold, because I would have sat there and said, there needs to be more blood, more blood. That's what I've been just saying, more blood, more death.
Yeah, I actually watched the movie not too long ago, and there's a part where the one lady seduces the guy in a shower, and she keeps her clothes on, and I was like, man, Vigil would have none of that.
I don't know. Well, even the scene where she screws the guy on the table.
Yeah, well, the other guy's watching through the mirror.
Right,
or whatever.
which was the scene in number 2 where she pokes the dude's eyes out.
Yeah.
I'm like, why didn't you poke his eyes out?
That's what I
People
say.
love that in the book. It was like, come on. And she does it on this dining table or something. It was like, no. So they just kind of mess with it. They were doing all sorts of character redesigns and everything. And there was a article that came out in Fangoria about it while it was being shot, but they did a little article, and I see these pictures of Claire, and she has red and black hair. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? You know? I start emailing the director. I'm going, okay, I understand you guys like to change everything. You changed M's hair to white. I'll live with it, you know. You changed the costume to be morphing off of him. Good, I'll live with that. But I go, what are you doing with Claire? You know, she's an icon of this story. And I guess he realized it. Her hair is black and blonde, but there's 2 scenes where they have the other hair. Which is good. He finally, you know, Claire's in it.
Yeah.
You know, it isn't like, oh, who's it? Oh, that's Claire. No, it's not. You know, so he did listen. But I can't even believe they did that.
I'm sitting here thinking about the elaborate, like airbrushed color covers of Faust.
Yeah.
Can we talk about some process stuff with those, man? How big were they? Or are those photographs? Like, what was the process to get those things printed?
Well, to do them, when I did like the Faust #1 cover and I painted it, I realized that I didn't know how to paint. Even though I had gone to, you know, painting classes and oil painting, but when I was doing these, because they're 11 by 17 covers, and I was painting like I was inking. So you see these ink lines feathering with paint. And I'm going, oh my God, you know. And I had, you know, we had an airbrush, and so I was doing airbrush backgrounds at the time. But it's the first cover is really just shows that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, you know. And the second one was funny because we have, for the first premiere, came out in a special premiere, I had done just the word dripping in airbrush, but they didn't print it with the airbrush, they just printed it in a solid red. So I go, oh shit, I need a cover for #2. So I go, okay, when I see this Playboy cover, I go, oh, I can use that girl, and just flip it, you know, and put a razor in her hand. But I had to airbrush it over the lettering, because I did it on the same thing. And so if you look at #2, you'll see when I lifted up the frisket that it pulled some of the paint off of the lettering. And so I had to airbrush her, and it came out nice. But the thing that was really nice about that is that North Star did that little flap over it. And that marketing device fucking sold that book.
I believe it.
Yeah, they were genius at that point.
Gotta see what's under that flap, man.
Right. Their marketing man did a great job on that. And
when you say marketing man, it makes it sound like North Star is a big operation.
well, there's the main guy, Dan Madsen. I'm trying to remember who his partner was that was doing the setup and all the art direction. I forget his name. He was a real nice guy too, but I forget his name. And he's the one that came up with it. But that sold it. People just died over that. Oh fuck! Look at that! And you just open it up, and there's this woman all bloody and everything, and it tripped them out. And there's some good stuff in that issue too. But I didn't really get into groove of painting the covers, I think, until I did some okay ones. But until #10, I finally went, oh, that's not bad. Now I had to study a lot of. I was studying Glenn Fabre paintings and Simon Bisley, his paintings.
Would you have seen their work from 2000 AD, or were they doing stuff here in America at that point?
Bisley was getting into the Americans. Yeah, he was doing Terminator stuff. He was doing Doom Patrol, and. So they were really, both of them were coming in. Fabre was doing Preacher covers, gorgeous stuff. And so I was like, wow, look at this guy. And I studied him quite a bit. But I don't really consider myself a painter. But I can fake it okay. So.
So you've named a few of these comics, Doom Patrol, Preacher, things like this. You keep up with any comics? Are you still reading any contemporary comics?
No. I don't read a lot of comics. And when I did collect comics, I basically didn't read them. I just looked at them for the art. I only collected if the artist I liked left the book, I left the book. I followed that artist around. Wherever Neil Adams went, I was going. Where he was going, wherever Wrightson was doing it, I was following Wrightson and these guys. I didn't give a shit about the stories. That's why I have a hard time creating stuff. I come up with these plots, I'm going, hey, what? But I don't read enough books and stuff to really figure out the deepness of it. That's why I was going to do with, I need a writer.
Well, we talked to Quinn for a little bit, but another name that I often associate with you is Tim Tyler. We talked about him a little bit, but maybe we could get into him a little bit more. Was it like a senpai kohai, like you were the big brother from another mother, or what was the association there? What was the dynamic between the two of you?
Well, he brought me over to North Star liking my work, so he had an admiration for Grips and everything, and he liked what I was doing with his character. So he looked up to me for a little bit, a little bit.
He's younger?
I think so. Yeah, I would say so. I know he's not older than me, but he's got to be.
So it's close.
Yeah, it's 3 years, 4 years. But he was always very generous to anything I was doing, and I liked what he was, when he inked my work, and I learned some texture techniques from him off of his inks, and so any time that I needed an inker, he was one of the ones I would always sit there and go, hey, come on, because we're close. We're close to the same ideas, the same. I see when he's doing drawings now, I go, I may have took that from me. So it's kind of funny.
You guys, I guess that goes back to the 80s, your association with him. And were you like FedExing original pages back and forth?
we didn't live close by any means. Even when we did Avatar stuff, it was always, I was sending him, I think Xeroxes, and he was inking over vellum on a lot of the stuff.
So you still have all your pencils, or?
What?
Do you still have all your pencils then?
Oh, yeah. But they were done like on copy paper. I didn't even use Bristol board for that stuff. Just cheap copy paper.
How long, see, I always love this part about comics. Like, I've collaborated with people who I hadn't stepped in the same room with until 5 years after working with these people. Was that a similar situation between you and Tim Tyler? When did you meet him?
Right, I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
I think I met him because we did a Faust tour. Did I meet him before that? When we did a Faust tour, we did a part in Chicago, and that's where North Star was, and I went to their office. I'm not sure if David was there. I'm sure, but I think I met Tyler there, because he was their main artist in doing stuff. Well, we always got along. He was always cool.
Do you keep up with his work? He seems very prolific. Whenever I go digging, I find a Tim Tyler comic I've never seen before.
I follow him on Facebook, and I see what he's doing, and it's always amazing. Yeah, he'll send me stuff if I contribute to it, or if I ask, he would send me it. But I don't ask a lot. But he works. I wish he could find some way to slow down, because he works so much that his ideas, it's like, oh, what'd you do here? You know, you can just see him thinking so much and throwing things in together, and it comes out. You go, that's neat, but if he didn't have to worry and think so much about just getting shit out and trying to make a living with it, I think he would do a lot better. But he's a wild man. I like his work, even though it's distorted. I wish he knew how to draw women better. But I figured after all these years, you know, inking over me, he might have picked up something. But he gets kind of wonky. That's his style.
Part of the charm of comics.
A little bit, but you'd want to see a little bit of progress. You know, that's one of the things. I'm you know, if you look at Faust, that's my career right there. That's me from the beginning, and me being pretty much where I'm at now. And you can see the whole style changing and hopefully getting better.
I imagine you have guys, collectors of your work. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that a part of your business? Like original art, selling original art, doing commissions?
I don't get a lot of people. I don't get a lot of people asking me for commissions. What I usually do, because I don't like doing other people's ideas. I like to just create my idea, throw it out there, and go, here you go, buy it, bitches. Yeah. And that only goes so much, you know. When somebody gives me an idea, I get a clock in my head of how much I got and how much time I want to put into this. Because I look at it when I'm at home, I'm making basically $100 an hour. But usually they're getting... Like, say, if I'm at a con and I do a sketch, I go, you got an hour of my time for $60. Pretty much I can get it done then. But when I'm home, I'm going, you got $100, it's a character. But usually I'm going to put in up to maybe 3 hours of work into that, you know? It's much better. And then if I'm doing it on my own and not listening to them, I'm just doing a drawing, and then I'm going, well, here it is for $300. There's a good, probably double to 3 times the amount that I should get if I put it on a time clock. But people don't see it a lot. They don't pick it up. I don't know why. Like at this convention we're at, I try to tell people the best deal you're getting is in my sketchbook and my sketch covers. I put more time into these things, and I'm not asking a lot for this. You know, you're getting some really good work for $300. Whereas, and it's one of my faults, I compare myself to other people going, what are you getting for $300 from this other dude? You know? And it's a great deal.
Have you sold originals from Faust? I've seen them in your portfolio.
Yeah. I got pretty much all of it still from issue 9 on. Most of it. I think there's a couple pages that I've sold from issue 12 or 10. But I got pretty much all the original art from there. And I've sold some stuff that I wish I hadn't sold. But from 1 through 8, that's where I've been selling most of it. There's pages I go, I'm not going to get rid of that. Like the double page splash in number 5, where there's an orgy scene where they're cutting up everybody. I'm keeping that one.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's a great piece.
I get it.
I remember doing that piece. It was like, oh, fuck yeah. The chopping of the people were like from Apocalypse Now when they do the cow mutilation.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking, you're seeing just slicing a body part, and you can see the bone and everything. And that was a neat part where I went, oh shit, I just got better. That was a page that I sat there and said, that's not bad. Even though she's up on her knees on top of somebody, she's a little distorted right through the hips and stuff, but I go, that's a damn good picture. That's always fun to come across when you're drawing something. I remember the first time I drew a picture and I did a Frazetta foot. He's on a stairway and the balance on the back foot, and you went, oh shit, I just figured that out, and that's cool. And you gotta find those in yourself as an artist. You gotta be able to sit there and not only criticize yourself, but you have to be able to sit there and go, wow, I did damn good work there. Even though there's 1,000 problems in this and there's 1,000 mistakes, you got to sit there and know at least 3 good things you did in a picture and at least 5 bad things you did, so you can get better.
Sound advice?
Put that in your scrapbook.
That's goddamn right, sir. When you're working on these pieces, certainly Faust, there's a large admiration from like the fucking heavy metalhead community.
Yeah.
Is this the kind of stuff you're listening to while you're putting these pages together?
No.
No.
Never got into metal.
Tchaikovsky music.
Yeah, some. A little Janet Jackson. Rhythm Nation shit. I like female singers with music, so I listen to pop and stuff like that. And if somebody tells me to listen to something, I will. But I have a thing against music.
Yeah.
I have a conflict of competitiveness with that because I go, why are women throwing their fucking bras and panties at these dudes? I hate it. A dude can go up there and just say, "Oh, I got a guitar, baby." Throw this shit. If you sit there and go, "Hey, look at this beautiful drawing I did," nah, it's fucking creative. It's the same thing.
There's a famous Dan Clowes comic strip, one pager, promoting the idea of the ink stud, and he's saying basically the same thing. Fuck these musicians.
Oh yeah.
Screw these guys. You ever see that ink stud strip?
No, but I understand it totally.
It ends with a guy holding a giant phallic brush right in the crotch region towards the camera, saying, "Hey, come on, hug an ink stud."
Yeah, it's terrible. And I always grew up like. You become the artist, and you're going to have these women loving your shit, and you're going to be able to get these models because you're so talented. Fuck no. They run away from that. And some of it's my subject matter. You sit there and go, "Oh, yeah, you're an artist, huh? Yeah, you want to see some of my work?"
That demon vagina cunnilingus.
They show some demon boning some butt, it's all over. It's just a drawing. It just shows to show that I got, an erotic mind. You're going to love it. Just relax. But no, I'll tell you one thing. When I did EO, that ruined my relationship.
Yep.
Because all of a sudden, oh, no, you're part of that, aren't you? That's part of you. I'm like, it's a fucking story. But no. It ruined it. It was just too much. And I go, it's a love story, really. Especially that first issue where the guy's radiated and he's all fucked up and he goes up to his wife and he starts to change and grow and her guts fall out of her vagina. It's like, and he's scared shitless. He's like, he doesn't know what's going on. I go, that's horrifying, but
He loves her.
Yeah, he loved her, and he's scared now. No, they didn't see it that way. They thought I hated women, and I got a lot of that then. You're a misogynist. No?
EO is left unfinished.
Oh, yeah, and it will be. That was a crazy fucking thing. Just the way that broke up. Just because the writer, his fiancée, and this is what I hear, this is how I understand it as, told him, "I don't want any of that money in our bank account." So I'm sitting there going, "Hey, where's issue 3? "Oh, yeah, I've been working on it. I'll have it to you next week." I don't hear anything. "Where's issue 3? "Oh, I'm getting it. I'm done. I'm going to get it into the mail." I don't hear anything. "Where is it?" "Oh, I sent it." "Where is it?" "Oh, I must have sent it to the wrong address." And then it was like, okay, dude. And this is a bright man. Franz Hinkle is a bright man. He's a teacher. And this dude didn't have the balls enough to sit there and tell me, my fiancé cut my dick off. And I can't do this. That's all you had to tell me. You just had to sit there and go, "I can't do it." And I would have understood. It was hardcore. I would have understood it, but he didn't have the balls enough to tell me. And I was like, well, just to show you can be bright, but you can't be honest with yourself. And that way it'll never be finished.
Right.
I've tried to draw some of it, but it's like, it's a hard, the character himself, because I consider myself to be kind of like a method artist, whereas you get into these characters, like Claire is the sexy me,
I can see it.
Yeah. It's pretty
The
obvious.
light's shining
Pretty
on your face right there.
It's pretty obvious, isn't it? And Emma's the kind of the controller in me, and Faust is just the fuck. I want to save myself, and so with every character that I do, I'm looking at these words and I'm trying to create emotion on this stuff. And EO is really hard because you got to get into this psyche of this just fucked up dude that just wants to fuck everything and uses dick as this way of destroying, controlling, being. Everything is right there, and he's constantly. It's a hard character to be, and especially being all bulky. The original idea was that he gets so big that he's dragging his dick along at the end. And there was a scene that I had that he gets to the scientist's building, and he takes it over, and he has the doctor caged up with the daughter and everything. But he has other people that were working there as his sex slaves. And he is supposed to start going after the daughter of Reich, the professor. And this other girl goes, no, you got me, You don't need anybody else. I can satisfy you. And he goes, oh, yeah, baby. Come here. And he brings her in there. All these people are watching and he starts finger banging her. And then he shoves his hand up her pussy, grabs her heart, and pulls the heart out of her, and then he eats it.
That's a Vigil moment.
Oh yeah,
That's a Vigil moment.
It'll be never visualized either. It's a loss.
Theater of the mind, man. Let the Kayfabers at home think about that one for a hot minute.
It was brutal. It was very brutal.
We talked. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, again, kind of process-oriented.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what a typical day is like, for you.
I'm a problem solver in the morning. Like right when I wake up, I'll get up, take a shower, I'll go over to a Starbucks for a couple hours, and I'll draw. And at that time in the morning is where I can solve all the problems that I had the day before or so, right in the morning. And then I come home, I take a little break, just getting things, maybe have lunch or something, but I'm back on the drawing table till from 12:30 to 5:30. I'll go to the gym for an hour and then I come back and start drawing again until I go to sleep. I just work all the time. I'm just really dedicated to it right now. I've been dedicated to it for a good amount of time. It's just that I go, being my age, I don't have a lot of years left. And if there's only one thing that I can sit here and go, you're going to pass on in some stupid little way, it's just going to be my art. And it's going to be what I can create and put out there. I try not to think of it too much because it sounds pompous, but in truth, that's all I got to leave behind. Because I don't have kids, I'm not married or anything like this, so I don't even give a shit about that. The only thing I give a shit about is this stupid noodle up here that can create something, and I'm constantly in fight with it. Like why, because I have a thing against. Why isn't my stuff attracting people? Why isn't it? The comic world is hypnotized by Marvel and DC. They have it. People walk into these conventions just going, Batman, this, and you're lucky. And they'll come by and go, oh, that's real nice, but what are you buying? Batman, Spider-Man, And now with the movies really punctuating this stuff, they don't have any. You would like to think that they're coming in here thinking that, wow, these people are really good and I'm going to just gravitate to what I like. But they don't, And there's other factors that I've learned throughout the thing, and a lot of it's my fault, is that I'm not if people like you, they'll buy you. That's what I think. And people don't like me that much.
We like you, Tim.
No, that's fine. I'm just saying. I know that I'm not a personable. I sit there like you said. You're just sitting there, my head's down. I'm not going to the people. Hey, hey, really, da 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 da.
We don't truck that Carney Barker shit here, though, man. So
I've done
we
it.
respect you.
I've done it, but it's not me. You know what I mean? There are times I go, okay, if I'm, especially if it's boring and I don't got if I don't got sketches to do, I'll stand up and be nice to people. But when I'm working, I figure I'm being nice to people too, because I'm being nice, getting my work done for these people that I want to satisfy. When I see people walking by with these prints that are just atrociously juvenile, and My Little Pony, grown men and women buying this stuff, it's like, you're really hanging this shit on your wall? It's for kids. That's for kids. But this business holds this idea of grown people being, I don't want to take away from cosplaying or anything like this, but when you're dressing up as a furry, at 20 some odd, or you're dressing up as some anime character, okay, it's fun, I guess. I'd never do it, but that's me being boring, Some of it's exciting. I saw a guy today at the convention, this big guy, and he's wearing these fucking anime shit, and I'm like, I wouldn't be caught dead like that. But that's his expression, his acceptance.
Does the do you find this creative life, creative process, is it pleasurable? Does it bring you joy, happiness? Is it torturous?
Well, it did bring me joy when I had money to do things. I live in poverty, I think being dedicated to it is an extreme challenge. That I keep drawing something and I put it out there and nobody wants to buy it, so I just keep drawing another one and keep throwing it out there and nobody wants to buy it, and you draw something else. Becomes frustrating because you're being told, and again, this sounds stupidly pompous, but I go to these conventions and people will sit there and go, you're one of the masters, you're great, and I'm going, well, if I'm so great, spend $5. And I don't say this, of course, but it runs through my mind. And then I have to sit there and go, where's the reality of it all? Where's the lie, and where's the just the fan being nice to you? Oh, you're real good. Oh, that's nice. And I've done it to people. Oh, that's really great. I'm not buying from them. So you got to just sit there and go, wow, how do you make money, and what is it? And then my answer is just keep drawing. And dig into your own brain to try to do better. But my better isn't to become, some child drawer. I'm zooming ahead. I'm heading for a barrier. They sit there and go, as you get better with art, the first steps, the canyon that you have to leap from better to better gets wider as you get better. And this leap now is like, and I don't think it's that far, but I think somehow I'm afraid of that because I know I'm not great. I know I'm good, and I know that I can do stuff, but I to me, greatness would be undeniably that these art dealers in this business, these people that are really into comics and would say praise Wrightson and shit like this, they should be praising me if they say I'm as good as I am, what people are saying I am. Not so much them. They might say it behind closed doors or whatever, but they're not they're not pursuing it. And some of that might be because they don't want to associate with what I do. And that's the extreme dirtiness, what I do. A lot of it has to do with that, but I like it. I don't mind drawing some demon getting butt fucked. It's kind of fun. I guess the way, that's the way I express my sexual drive and stuff like that. But a lot of it's just lies and just being polite. I take that back. It's not lies. It's just being polite, But
Were you raised religiously?
no, I don't believe in God. I believe in goodness. Every time I hear people sit there and go, "Oh God, this, oh God, that," believe this and that, I just substitute the word good, because there is good and evil, and I try to portray that in my work too. There is good and evil, and there can be redemption. You can fight for redemption. I'm always doing that. But the supreme being, know-all, and stuff like that, nah. Even though in Faust there's the devil, but I really never got into there's a God. So I believe evil is more predominant in the world, and it's how you face that.
There are two more things that I would like to hit before we're done tonight. I would like to talk about the association with Avatar a little bit, how that came about, and what you got from that. And I would also like to get just a little piece about Joe Vigil and the tandem that you guys share as brothers. Is there any competition or whatever? So where should we go first? I'll give you the choice. And it's not Sophie's choice because we're hitting them both before we're out of here, man.
I guess we can talk about Joe.
Let's talk Joe. Gunfighters in Hell.
Well, but it goes back to growing up with him, being he was very prolific as an artist when he was young. He was winning awards and stuff like that through high school and everything, and he got stuff put into this gallery in Sacramento, and I admired him. I admired what he was doing. I looked up to what his ability was, and I knew I wasn't as good as he was. But there came a point that I knew I was doing my own stuff that was compatible, and I know that at a point I was taking it more seriously. And there's a story that we've talked about that we went to. We were in New Jersey visiting my sister. And we went into, my brother was there presenting stuff to Marvel Comics, and they were interested in him. And this is back in 76 or 77. I think it was 76. And I went there and stayed with them too after my brother was there a couple of weeks. And Marvel was interested in my brother because my brother had a very Jack Kirby power to his work, very explosive. Very dynamic, but he had a very raw style, and he had a certain flatness to his work that didn't hinder it. But to be within Marvel Comics, he would have had to have learned to bring that out a little bit. Looking back on it now, but we went and visited Continuity, and we showed Neil Adams our work. And he told my brother, he goes, you need to work on your anatomy. Now, my brother's not so much a guy that can take criticism. No. And he got pissed. And I knew that Neil was wrong. But, my brother looked up to him, admired him as I did, but I knew he was wrong. And it was two different schools of thought. Where Neil Adams was much more realistic, much more anatomically correct, where my brother was, like I say, Jack Kirby. He made muscles where there weren't muscles, and it didn't matter because the imagery was so powerful. But he took that to heart. And when we went home, he really looked at anatomy to an extreme where it became very sinewed, very defined in his drawing, these muscles. It was like, well, you could soften this stuff up, you know. But it's almost like now he sometimes draws, and it's almost like these people don't have skin on them.
Right.
And which is interesting in a perspective, but it's also like it's like you may need to change that a little bit. And he's always had a problem, with hands and feet. You look at his drawings, and he's always having feet step behind rocks or something like that.
Classic maneuver.
Yeah, it's a classical maneuver. But it's like, maybe you should try to work on feet, you know? I was like, there was a point where I sat there and looked at it and go, well, you got to learn hands. So I read the book on Bernie Hogarth, How to Draw Hands. And it wasn't a hard read. I read it over a plane flight. And it was like, okay. And you just start drawing hands. And if they come out, you keep working it. Then you sit there and go, well, I'm just going to have to move on. And that one didn't work. And do another hand. But I looked at my work as correcting. And my brother and I, we have two different ways of thinking with our art. And in my belief, I don't know if he thinks this way about it. But he looks at it as like, he waits and waits. And then he goes, okay, I'm going to draw. Boom. And he just explodes it out. And Ned's done. It's there. Boom. And I'll look at it going, wow, that's pretty good, but this is wrong, this could be changed, this could be changed. Because my approach is, here's the rough, refine, 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 and then we got a picture, and it's still a little wrong, but I'm okay with it.
That was one of the things that really fascinated me with the stuff that you would post on Facebook. So some years ago, where you would have this pinup piece, and it would be in pencil, pretty tight pencil.
Right.
And then you would see it in pencil again, and a lot has changed. Some of the pose has changed up, some of the background stuff has changed. And then you see another pencil, still as tight, still as detailed, and the characters changed even more.
Yeah.
And then it gets into inking time. But there would be several very, very,
There could
very
be,
detailed
yeah.
iterations of the
could
same
be.
illustration.
Because I look at it, like you said, I'm a method artist in a way. And so the body has to be positioned in a comfortable way where I feel it. You know, it's like, all of a sudden it's like, it's here. It's like, no, and all of a sudden it goes, and you go, that's not bad. You know, the angle's right, the motion of the hand is right, how close the faces are better, you know, and if it's like an embrace between a man and a woman, you know, the bodies are working better, and not only are they working better, but it's looking like a Tim Vigil drawing.
Right.
You know, I can see my signature. I can see me in my line. And that's something that I'm very proud of. That when people sit there and go, I can look at a Vigil and know that's a Vigil.
Yes.
I'm going, I've done my job. Because growing up, every artist had a different style.
Yes.
You had crappy styles drawing comics, and you had great styles. But everybody, you knew who each of these people were by their style. And that was very, very important. And when everything started becoming like the same, that gets me mad. You know, it's like, what are you doing? Everybody's drawing. God, you know, why do you just keep feeding the same style out? But with some of my my advice to artists is like, first you got to find it within you. You gotta know what your likes and dislikes are and your passion of what you want to present. Mine are horror, sex, violence, and gothic details and stuff. I love that. Those are pretty much the prime things, and those are going to be in almost every drawing I do. Even if they're a nice piece, you're still going to feel a little sense of, ooh, you know, there's a little weirdness in that. It's hard for me to draw a kid's drawing. I can do it. I can do the cartoony once in a while, but because I'm so much into just the weirdness of stuff. But what you have to do, once you feel that in yourself, and you know where you want things to go, throughout your own body, because if they sit there and say, like, everything you draw looks like you. And so once you start seeing yourself in your work, you keep going toward that, because basically you're finding yourself. If any artist that's coming up, they have to understand themselves. They have to understand that there's not going to be anybody that's going to help them become who they are. I know my faults. I know where I've fucked up at. I know where I fuck up at in life and stuff like this. And it's habit now. And so I'm going, well, that's the way it's going to go. Every day I do wake up going, things can change. New things can happen every day. And most of the time, it's not in my personal life that I want it to change. I go, it's in my art life. Every day I can create something just totally mind-blowing. And that's a hard thing to go after. But you have to find within yourself to really sit there and push your personality. And you got to take what's in you and put it out there and not be ashamed of it. You got to own it. You got to sit there and go, that's me. And if you hate it, all right, you can tell me why you hate it, and we can have that discussion, But the one thing I try to put in there, you cannot deny that it's not good. You can hate the subject matter. Like my mother would always say to me, oh, I'm so happy you're doing what you do, but why do you have to draw what you draw?
Would she see some of that splayed pussy stuff, or would you protect her from
Not that stuff.
Okay.
But she knew, I would show her some stuff that she would go, why do you draw that? But she was always happy that I did what I did. But I didn't expose her to a lot of it. But, she wished I would have been a little bit more family-oriented, doing portraits or, dog pictures. Much as that sounds...
The dog pictures were for Joe Vigil.
You can make money. You can make money doing dog pictures. People's dogs, fuck, you can make money at that. Or portraits of their kids, hell yeah, you can make money. I'm not interested in that. There's if you sit there and think, you have this brain in you, and you have this imagination, and and you sit there and go. And there's all these fucking creative people that are doing all sorts of shit around you. And you're trying to sit there and go, but you're an individual, and what do you find? Everybody, all these creative people, brilliant people, are finding nuggets of gold in their creativity. And it's like, and they're finding it because they're an individual. And you got to sit there and go, there's gold up there. And you just got to dig. And you got to just keep digging and put it down, and you'll have it. It's crazy stuff, because there's so many people much more better than me. But the one thing I have that I always look at is go, but they can't be me. And that's the only thing you can hold on to. There are great artists that aren't technically great. And there are technically great artists that aren't great artists. So you got to sit there and go, and I lean toward more, not technically great, but a great artist. I'm technical, of course, but I know that I'm never going to be so technically great that that's what defines the work I do. The work I do would be, how much emotion can you put into that? When somebody doesn't like something, I go, I did a pretty good job there, That influenced them. That made them sit there and go, ooh, Or if they sit there and go, wow. Like my sister thinks that the best picture that I've ever done is this one of this angel in this cathedral, and there's these knights around him, the angel bowing down to her. And a pain in the ass picture to draw. But it's a nice picture. And it's this the idea of faith. Again, I'm not religious in the God sense, but I'm religious in the sense of like symbols of good. I'll tell you my story why I don't believe in God. Okay? Within the simple knowledge I have of the Bible and stuff like this is like, because man was so bad, God came down and destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Because man was so bad, he destroyed, he made the rains and had Noah save all the animals and recreated, supposedly, right? But I sit there and go, well, the Vatican, which we consider the pinnacle to God, the Pope is the Word of God, the closest hand, and these guys are fucking kids. Constantly. And if there's a God, God's letting that shit happen. To who? To test us? To sit here and go, oh, to test man? No, he should sit there and go, walk away and don't look back because I'm going to burn that place. And he hasn't done it. And so I don't believe in him.
There's time. He might burn it.
He needs to burn the Vatican. He needs to burn religion when they have priests going around, assaulting children, and they're not, and they just go, oh, just push it off. Innocence like that. No. I don't put up with that. I don't put up with a God that does that. But there's good, and I believe in good. And I'm not a really super good guy, but I believe in it. So.
You know, another guy who I think doesn't believe in God is probably the publisher of Avatar Press.
Why?
Just from the subject matter and the body of work that he's pumped out.
Well, like,
it's pretty hardcore shit.
He does. The funny thing is, when I first started with him, he.
What's his name?
William Christensen.
Did he come to you, or did you go to him?
How did we meet? I must have met him at San Diego or something. I don't remember exactly how we met, but we were going to do something for him. We did 777 the Raft, and he put limits on us. Like, oh, you can't show pussy, you can't show dick, and everything. And then within, I don't know, maybe a couple issues, he said, do whatever you want.
Yeah, I was going to say, I recall seeing a lot of genitals in there.
Yeah, but it's like he understood that if I always look at it this way, with my creativity, because I'm stubborn and a douchebag, and I go along with things, and if I know the structure of power, I go, oh, you're the boss? All right, you're going to tell me. I may not agree with you, but you're the boss. But I figure if someone's going to hire me, I'm like a Mustang running wild. And it's like, don't hold that fucker back. Let him do what he does, because it's a beautiful thing. And if you tame that, it's not the same horse. It might be a controlled horse, and it might look good, but it doesn't have the same wildness as it used to.
You did a lot of work with them, though.
I did a lot of work with him?
Right.
Yeah.
Like three post-Faust miniseries or so?
Yeah, we were doing stuff, and he was putting it out, but it got complicated after a while. I don't think the numbers came out as much as he liked. There were times that we were supposed to do color books, so I drew it as a color book, and it didn't come out as a color book. And then when he did color the book, it looked like shit, and I would complain about it, because he was working so fast on stuff that they did the coloring like 3 colors. That was it. The whole thing was just 3 colors. I'm like, God, you got to be kidding me. Put 5 in.
Yeah.
Don't just put 3 in. Put 5 in, and I'll be happy with 5. They wouldn't do it. And when the pillar, the costume, the ground are all blue,
right?
You're just going, come on. And then there's a red, or there's flesh, and that's it. And you're like, it's sad. I didn't like it, and I knew the colorist that was working on it, and he's just like, he had to crank this shit out because William wanted him to. William had a problem with quality control. And I mean quality control as in putting out quality work.
Mm-hmm.
He believed to get it out as fast as it could and enough, but I was like, like I said, just put 5 colors in, don't put 3. Slow down a little bit. Just a little bit. I mean, I understand that there's a production, but just slow down a little bit. And he wouldn't listen to me.
Is that some of the last comic stuff you've done, published?
I've done little independent stuff here and there, but that was the most that I was putting out at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed what we did. There was a story that came out called Claire's Lust. That was kind of like the history of Claire, which was a decent little story, but I cranked that fucker. And there's just some shit-ass drawing in that. I'm embarrassed to look at it. I look at some of these pages like, ugh. But there was some neat stuff in it too, but a lot of it was bad. And I think a lot of that was coming down to the end that, I was supposed to, at one point, the idea was I get all my original art back. He was never and then he would start holding on to it, and then I'd go, where's my art? He goes, it'll take too long to dig through this shit. How about if I just buy it and give you a fee for it? And there was a couple pieces I wanted back that I never got back because I just took the fee. And it was, and then I said, well, this isn't working out the way it was supposed to. It always gets down to our original agreement and, when do they turn on it? And when they turn on it, I sit there and go, okay, I'll walk away. But it was all right for a while. He gave us freedom. But it didn't sell great.
You mentioned they give you freedom. You've always kind of worked in the independents. Creator rights have come up. In the 80s, there were some movements toward creator rights. The 90s, Image founders talked about creator rights. Is that something you think about as a comic book creator? Is it something you talk to other creators about?
I don't talk to people about it, but it's always, when you, like, say, when we did Faust with Avatar, we kept the rights to it and everything like that, and he only had certain rights for, like, publishing rights for that bit, but if he had to do, like, any other thing, it was, we think about it, so we don't lose it. It was like when we did the movie, it was like, you got movie rights, you don't got any other rights, and that's it. But I don't think about it. I'm not smart enough to be really thinking about that stuff. I don't get into it. That's for lawyers, and I hate lawyers.
I think we're all in agreement on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
We spend a lot of time digging in the bins, and this is, to some extent, we knew Faust, but then we start to discover through digging in the bins, then we find grips and stuff like that. In Caliber Presents, there was another cartoonist who did a little work on some other stories in there, a guy by the name of Ken Landgraf. And he's a dude that we check out a lot. You all know the name?
No.
Okay, I was just curious about that. Just because he's another artist that we really dig deep in. Do you have much else? Yeah? I think we covered it, man. What do you have that you're working on now? What's the next convention? Because we'll put this interview out right now. I believe it's June 15th. We'll be putting this interview out pretty soon. So what conventions do you have coming up? What kind of appearances and stuff?
I got a Miami show at the beginning of July, the weekend of the 4th. San Diego, of course, is coming up. I'm looking at doing Tampa, maybe Chicago. It's like one a month. A couple of them. In the summer, sometimes it gets to be about 2 a month, but that's what I got in my plans so far. Miami and San Diego, the next two.
And there's a presence on social media. You may or may not be the guy who puts the images up there on the Instagram, but it's there, man. So Tim Vigil,
Yeah.
to Vigil Art on Instagram.
Is that what it's called?
Something like, there might be an underscore somewhere here or
Okay.
there, man. But
I don't know.
we'll have the links in the description below. You're on Facebook. We got dinner earlier today. You mentioned something about a Kickstarter.
There's a character called Primal, the Jungle Girl, that I did a part for in a Kickstarter before, and now there's a new one out. It's called Primal the Fierce Campaign or something. But I'm doing a 16-page story for that. And that's done. And I think that's the newest thing that will be coming out. I'm doing I don't know if you're familiar with Castle Rain, Jack the Lantern. That's a comic that I've worked on, covers, and I did a story for a couple of them. I'm doing a new story for those guys that I'm just starting to work on that. But I don't know much what's happened up to where I'm drawing, so I'm going, what the fuck is this? I don't know what these are. So that's the problem with drawing other people's stories. Like if I was to go to Marvel or DC and I was to do Batman or Conan or whatever, I wouldn't know what was going on with these characters. I'd be like, who are they? Like when I did Badger Run. When I did 3 issues of Badger.
Yeah. We could talk First Comics.
Okay.
There was that other miniseries you
But
did too.
when I first got in, I did Badger. And Ron Lim was drawing him before me. So the first issue, I drew him like Ron Lim drew him. And people said, no, do your own thing. I said, oh, okay. I had to get into and I didn't know the character. Again, like I said, being a method artist, it was, and then I finally got into it, and he got better. But then I left with 3 issues. And then we were able to do Zero Tolerance, which was a fun one. Dave Barber, that wrote that, was working with me at Tower Video. I was the artist doing the displays and stuff, and he was just working there. And he was into movies, and he was writing, and so I was able to get him to come in with me on that. And there's a character in it called Molly McKnight, and there was a girl that came in, and that was her name. Well, that is a really cool name, and so we developed a whole story around just basically that name. And that did okay, but they were hand coloring it at that time. The coloring wasn't great.
That's right. I think was it that blue line method?
Probably.
Yeah.
With the layover.
Yeah.
And I had Gary Amaro help me on it. That was doing Fat Ninja, and we both did it together. But something, I don't remember what it was. I had to leave at the 4th issue, and he basically finished it off of my layouts. I didn't get to finish it as well as I wanted. They were cool.
Work for hire gigs. Get that page rate.
Yeah, but I think after I did that, they kind of collapsed. It must be the kiss of death for people. Don't hire me. You're gonna go out of business afterwards. So.
I'm good if you're good, Jim.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
it?
better than good. That was fantastic.
Tim, that was a heck of an interview.
That's it? Don't you want to talk about evil?
How about Glenn Danzig? Is he a fan? You ever get a email from that guy or something?
Glenn Danzig.
Something strikes me like he'd be a big fan.
He was a
of your
fan.
comics.
I did some work for Verotic.
Did you?
Yeah, I did a couple stories. He's a tough one, though. He makes all the decisions, so it's like when you're working with the other people underneath him, and you go, what about this? And I don't know. I got to ask Glenn. Glenn had to make all the decisions, and if he's on tour, it's hard to get a hold of. But there was one funny story with this guy that I don't understand it. I did this story, and he wanted a certain... This character she was tied up and she had a mask, but he wanted little cat ears on the mask. And I was like, fuck that shit. So I drew it without the cat ears, and they're just little dink dink, little triangles on the head. And I turn it in, he goes, "Oh, dude, you need to put those cat ears back." And and he sent them back to me, just to go ding ding ding.
Right. Yeah, we're talking FedEx or UPS or something.
Yeah,
Like.
I'm going. You could do it yourself. You know how to draw. I'm just going. Come on. But no, he wanted it because he's like, I paid you. You do it. And it was just silly stuff like that. Like another part, it was that he had this character that had ponytails, but she had like 3 tits. I go, that's kind of weird. So let's weird her up. So I put her ponytails in these leather stockings, just to jazz it up. And he goes, no.
It's off model, man.
Take them off. No, none of that. And I'm like, okay. He didn't give it. With me, he didn't give it. I don't know if he did it with other bands because it looks like Beasley could do whatever he wanted,
Yeah.
But with me, it was like, no, I want it this way. I want it this way. And it was like, and I don't think it changed it any. It's like it made it a little bit more interesting. But no, I had to change that stuff. And I just went, oh. The ear part got me though. I was shocked at that. I was like, come on. I didn't say that to him. I mean, he sent it. I changed it. It took me 10 minutes. Send it back. I didn't get it. He could have done it himself. Well,
Man, I think that's a good enough place to close this as any. Tim, want to thank you for coming, man.
you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, man. We'll get this up soon.